How about that one? Okay. So the priests agreed to not accept any more money from the people, and they also agreed to let others take responsibility for repairing the temple. Then Jehoiada, the priest, bored a hole in the lid of a large chest and set it on the right-hand side of the altar. At the entrance of the temple of the Lord, the priests guard at the entrance of the temple of the Lord. The priests guarding the entrance pull out all the people's contributions into the chest. Whenever the chest became full, the court secretary and the high priest counted the money that had been brought to the Lord's temple and put it into bags. Then they gave the money to the construction supervisors who used it to pay the people working on the Lord's temple, the carpenters, the builders, the masons, and the stone cutters. They also used the money to buy the timber and the finished stone needed for repairing the Lord's temple, and they paid any other expenses related to the temple's restoration. The money brought to the temple was not used for making silver bowls, lamps, snuffers, basins, trumpets, or other articles of gold or silver to the temple of the Lord. It was paid to the workmen who used it for the temple repairs. No accounting of this money was required from the construction supervisors because they were honest and trustworthy men. However, the money that was contributed for guilt offerings and sin offerings was not brought into the Lord's temple. It was given to the priests for their own use. The end of Joash reign. Okay. About this time, King Hazael of Aram went to war against Gath and captured it. Then he turned to attack Jerusalem. King Joash collected all the sacred objects that Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, the previous kings of Judah, had dedicated along with what he himself had dedicated. He sent them all to Hazael along with all the gold in the treasuries of the Lord's temple and the royal palace. So Hazael called off his attack on Jerusalem. The rest of the events in Joash's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. Joash officers plotted against him and assassinating him in Beth Millo on the road to Silla. The assassins were Josachar, son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, son of Shomer, both trusted advisors. Joash was buried with his ancestor in the city of David. Then his son Amaziah became the next king. Footnote. The difficult task of operating the temple was an important part of Judah's spiritual recovery. Yet raising the money to rebuild proved difficult. The priests and people were not willing to make the sacrifices necessary to get the job done. So Joash made the priests accountable for the money the people contributed. With this system of accountability, the people of Judah were able to accomplish the renovation process. This should remind us that accountability and concrete planning are necessary for a successful rebuilding program. Without them, we will probably take the path of least resistance and make little progress toward recovery. Joash had made great strides toward leading Israel into spiritual recovery. But here we see that his faith wavered easily when he was put in a difficult situation. Under threat of Aramean attack, he gave away the temple treasury to pay off King Hazael over Aram. He failed to turn to God, who was capable of delivering his people from the Arameans, and start his own human solution. The consequences were great national losses and a perpetuation of faithless living. Even after great success, we're still susceptible to giving into fear and denial. We need to trust God to defeat the enemies in our lives. Trying to fight them on our own will only invest them in with great power. I'm gonna read that again. Even after great success, we're still susceptible to giving in to fear and denial. We need to trust God to defeat the enemies in our lives. Trying to fight them on our own will only invest them with greater power. I'm going to move because I'm in the shadow now and I'm freezing. So I'm going to go over there to where it's sunny. Okay. I forgot my footstool. I have a footstool. Where were we? Sorry guys, I just needed to adjust a little bit. The assassins were Josachar, son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, Jehoshaphat, son of Shomer, both trusted advisors. Joash was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. Then his son Amaziah became the next king. Jehoshaphat rules in Israel. Chapter 13. Jehoshaphat rules in Israel. Jehoshaphat, son of Jehu, began to rule over Israel in the 23rd year of King Joash's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 17 years, but he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He followed the example of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, continuing the sins that Jeroboam had led Israel to commit. So the Lord was very angry with Israel, and he allowed King Hazael of Aram and his son Ben-Hadad to defeat them repeatedly. Then Jehoahaz prayed for the Lord's help, and the Lord heard his prayer, for he could see how severely the king of Aram was oppressing Israel. So the Lord provided something to rescue the Israelites from the tyranny of the Arameans. Then Israel lived in safety Then Israel lived in safety again as they had in former days. But they continued to sin. Following the evil example of Jeroboam, they also allowed the Asherah pole in Samaria to remain standing. Asherah. Finally, Jehoahaz's army was reduced to 50 charioteers, 10 chariots, and 10,000 full soldiers. The king of Aram had killed the others, trampling them like dust under his feet. The rest of the events in Jehoahaz You see that sizzling? It was one of the old ones, one of the old logs. Jehoash. Where am I? The rest of the events in Jehoahaz's reign, everything he did and the extent of his power are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. When Jehoahaz died, he was buried in Samaria. Then his son Jehoash became the next king. Jehoash rules in Israel. Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, began to rule over Israel in the 37th year of King Joash's reign in Judah. Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, began to rule over Israel in the 37th year of King Joash's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 16 years, but he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. The rest of the event in Jehoash's reign and everything he did, including the extent of his power and his war with King Amaziah of Judah, are recorded in the book of the history of the king of Israel. When Jehoash died, he was buried in Samaria with the king of Israel. Then his son Jeroboam II, Jeroboam II, became the next king. Elisha's final prophecy. When Elisha was in his last illness, King Jehoash of Israel visited him and wept over him. My father, I see the chariots and charioteers of Israel, he cried. Elisha told him, get a bow and some arrows, and the king did as he was told. Elisha told him, put your hand on the bow, and Elisha laid his own hands on the king's hands. Then he commanded, open that eastern window, and he opened it. Then he said, shoot. So he shot an arrow. Elisha proclaimed, this is the Lord's arrow, an arrow of victory over Aram, for you will completely conquer the Arameans at Aphek. Then he said, now pick up the other arrows and strike them against the ground. So the king picked them up and struck the ground 3 times, but the man of God was angry with him. You shouldn't have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times, he exclaimed. Then you have been beating Aram until he was entirely destroyed. Now you will be victorious only 3 times. Then Elisha died and was buried. A group of Moabite raiders used to invade the land each spring. Once, when some Israelites were burying a man, they spied a band of these raiders. So they hastily threw the corpse into the tomb of Elisha and fled. But as soon as the body touched Elisha's bones, the dead man revived and jumped to his feet. King Hazael of Aram had oppressed Israel during the entire reign of King Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious and merciful to the people of Israel, and they were not totally destroyed. He pitied them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And to this day, he still not completely destroyed them and or banished them from his presence. King Hazael of Aram died, and his son Ben-Hadad became the next king. Then Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, recaptured Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the towns that had been taken from Jehoash's father, Jehoahaz. Jehoash defeated Ben-Hadad on 3 occasions, and he recovered the Israelite towns. Okay. Footnote. The experience of King Jehoahaz of Israel is a solemn case study of what happens when you play around with recovery. Jehoahaz apparently was humbled by his consistent defeats by the Arameans. He admitted he was powerless and turned to God, the all-important first step of recovery. But after God graciously granted relief and freedom, Jehoahaz fell back into his old dysfunctional patterns again. The consequences of his actions then led to the near collapse of his rule. When he hit bottom, it is relatively easy to give things over to God. When we hit bottom, it is relatively easy to give things over to God. We have nothing worth holding on. True recovery is only possible when we leave our life in God's hands, even when things are going well. Amen. King Jehoash of Israel was another individual who started the recovery process but didn't go far enough. Though he was a king who did what was evil in the Lord's sight, Jehoash was greatly touched emotionally when the prophet Elisha was about to die. He expressed his great escape and grief for Elisha, but when Elisha gave Jehoash instructions that would lead him to victory over Aram, Jehoash followed them half-heartedly, thus limiting his progress. Anything less than complete commitment to the recovery process will result in complete recovery. will result in incomplete recovery. I'm going to read that again. Anything less than complete commitment to the recovery process will result in incomplete recovery. Feet are toasty, even through the soles of these shoes. Yeah. Chapter 14. Amaziah rules in Judah. Amaziah, son of Joash, began to rule over Judah in the second year of the reign of King Jehoash of Israel. Amaziah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother was Jehoaddin from Jerusalem. Amaziah did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, but not like his ancestor David. Instead, he followed the example of his father, Joash. Amaziah did not destroy the pagan shrines, and the people still offer sacrifices and burn incense there. When Amaziah was well established as king, he executed the officials who had assassinated his father. However, he did not kill the children of the assassins, for he obeyed the command of the Lord as written by Moses in the book of the law. For he obeyed the command of the Lord. Book of the law. Parents must not be put to death for the sins of their children, nor children for the sins of their parents. Those deserving to die must be put to death for their own crimes. Amaziah also killed 10,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt. He also conquered Selah and changed its name to Joktheel, as it is called to this day. One day, Amaziah sent messengers with this challenge to Israel's king Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz of Israel. But King Jehoash of Israel replied to King Amaziah of Judah with this story. Out in the Lebanon mountains, a thistle sent a message to a mighty cedar tree. Give your daughter in marriage to my son. But just then a wild animal of Lebanon came by and stepped on the thistle, crushing it. You have indeed defeated Edom, and you are proud of it. But be content with your victory and stay at home. Why stir up trouble that will only bring disaster on you and the people of Judah? But Amaziah refused to listen, so King Jehoash of Israel mobilized his armies against King Amaziah of Judah. The two armies drew up their battle lines at Beth Shemesh in Judah. Judah was routed by the army of Israel, and its army scattered and fled for home. King Jehoash of Israel captured Judah's king, Amaziah, son of Joash, and grandson of Ahaziah, at Beth Shemesh. Then he marched to Jerusalem, where he demolished 600 feet of Jerusalem's wall from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate. He carried off all the gold and silver and all the articles from the temple of the Lord. He also seized the treasures from the from the royal palace along with hostages and then returned to Samaria. The rest of the event in Jehoash's reign and everything he did, including the extent of his power and his war with King Amaziah of Judah, are recorded in the book of the history of the king of Israel. When Jehoash died, he was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and his son Jeroboam too became the next king. King Amaziah of Judah lived for 15 years after the death of King Jehoash of Israel. The rest of the events of Amaziah's reign are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. There was a conspiracy against Amaziah's life in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But his enemies sent assassins after him, and they killed him there. They brought his body back to Jerusalem on a horse, and he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. All the people of Judah crowned Amaziah's 16-year-old son Uzziah, the king, in place of his father Amaziah. Uzziah as king in place of his father Amaziah. After his father's death, Uzziah rebuilt the town of Elath and restored it to Judah. Jeroboam II rules in Israel. Jeroboam II, the son of Jehoash, began to rule over Israel in the 15 years of King Amaziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 41 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. Jeroboam II recovered the territories of Israel between Lebo Hamath and the Dead Sea. Just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had promised through Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath Hepher. For the Lord saw the bitter suffering of everyone in Israel, and that there was no one in Israel, slave or free, to help them. And because the Lord had not said he would blot out the name of Israel completely, he used Jeroboam II, the son of Jehoash, to save them. The rest of the event of the reign of Jeroboam II, and everything he did, including the extent of his power, his wars, and how he recovered for Israel both Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. Then Jeroboam II died. When Jeroboam II died, he was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Then his son Zechariah became the next king. Zechariah. See, sometimes it's K, sometimes it's footnote. Amaziah of Judah demonstrated how a parent's behavior often has a significant impact on his children's behavior. Amaziah followed the example of his father Joash. Joash's strengths and weaknesses were evidenced in the behavior of his son Amaziah. Notable was the blind spot in regard to the shrines of false worship. Perhaps it is best to say that Amaziah's commitment to God was mostly defined by Joash's commitment. We need to remember that our children are watching us and may well follow suit. Learning to trust God and obey His program for godly and healthy living is more than just a personal victory. Learning to trust God and obey His program for godly and healthy living is more than just a personal victory. It is an opportunity to leave a godly legacy for our children and grandchildren. God, in his sovereignty, can use oppressive or abusive personalities as part of his wider plan. God allowed the evil reign of King Jeroboam II to last 41 years only because God had special purpose for him. Even though Jeroboam too had no discipline, faith, or commitment to God, God used him as his instrument to maintain the independence of the northern kingdom for the time being. His perspective was to help those in recovery understand what God does not always immediately punish an oppressive personality. God may have something special for this person to do. Time is it? Couple more chapters. I won't put any more wood till later. Chapter 15. Uzziah rules in Judah. Uzziah, son of Amaziah, began to rule over Judah in the 27th year of the reign of King Jeroboam II of Israel. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother was Jecoliah from Jerusalem. He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his father Amaziah had done, but he did not destroy the pagan shrines, and the people still offered sacrifices and burned incense there. The Lord struck the king with leprosy, which lasted until the day he died. He lived in isolation in a separate house. The king's son Jotham was put in charge of the royal palace, and he governed the people of the land. Then the rest of the events of Uzziah's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of kings of Judah. Then when Uzziah died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Jotham became the next king. Zechariah rules in Israel. Zechariah, son of Jeroboam II, began to rule over Israel in the 20th year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 6 months. Zechariah did what was evil in the Lord's sight, as his ancestors had done. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. Then Shallum, son of Habesh, conspired against Zechariah, assassinated him in public, and became the next king. The rest of the events of Zechariah's reign are recorded in the book of the history of the king of Israel. So the Lord's message to Jehu came true. Your descendants will be kings of Israel down to the 4th generation. That's hot. Let's see it. It's too hot for the cables. On my feet. It's okay. It's okay. Shallum rules in Israel. Shallum, son of Habesh, began to rule over Israel in the 39th year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. Shallum reigned in Samaria only 1 month. The Menahem son, then Menahem, son of Gadi, went to Samaria from Tirzah and assassinated him, and he became the next king. The rest of the event of Shallum's reign, including his conspiracy, are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. Menahem rules in Israel. At the time, Menahem destroyed the town of Tappuah and all the surrounding countries as far as Tirzah. Because its citizens refused to surrender the town, he killed the entire population and ripped open the pregnant women. Menahem, son of Gadi, began to rule over Israel in the 39th year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 10 years, but Menahem did what was evil in the Lord's sight. During his entire reign, he refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. The king of Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria invaded the land, but Menahem paid him 37 tons of silver to gain his support in tightening his grip on royal power. Menahem extorted the money from the rich of Israel, demanding that each of them pay 50 pieces of silver to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned from attacking Israel and did not stay in the land. The rest of the events of Menahem's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the king of Israel. When Benahiah died, his son Pekahiah became the next king. Oh, that was hot. Pekahiah rules in Israel. Pekahiah, son of Menahem, began to rule over Israel in the 50 years of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 2 years, but Pekahiah did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. Then Pekah, son of Remaliah, the commander of Pekahiah's army, conspired against him with 50 men from Gilead. Pekah assassinated the king. Along with Argon and Arieh in the citadel of the palace at Samaria. And Pekah reigned in his place. The rest of the events of Pekahiah's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. My lips are dry. Pekah rules in Israel. Pekah, son of Remaliah, began to rule over Israel in the 52nd year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 20 years. But Pekah did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. During Pekah's reign, King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria attacked Israel again, and he captured the towns of Ijon, Abel-Beth-Maacah, Janoah, Kadesh, and Hazor. He also conquered the regions of Gilead, Galilee, and all of Naphtali. He took the people to Assyria as captives. Then Hoshea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah and assassinated him. He began to rule over Israel in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. The rest of the events in Pekah's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. Jotham rules in Judah. Jotham, son of Uzziah began to rule over Judah in the second year of King Pekah's reign in Israel. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. Jotham did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight. He did everything his father Uzziah had done, but he did not destroy the pagan shrines. And the people still offered sacrifices and burned incense there. He rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. The rest of the events in Jotham's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. In those days, the Lord began to send King Rezin of Aram and King Pekah of Israel to attack Judah. When Jotham died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Ahaz became the next king. Footnote. Jeroboam's long evil reign could not guarantee stability or power of the northern kingdom. When his equally evil son Zechariah became king, God allowed Zechariah to rule only 6 months before he was assassinated. God had kept the word of judgment he had made against Jehu generations before. This was the end of this primary evil line of descendants. Jehu's failure had led to the failure of his descendants. Unless we seek recovery now, the results may be disastrous for our children and grandchildren. The reigns of Kings Shallum and Pekahiah of the northern kingdom shows what often happens to oppressive personalities who refuse to face their need for recovery. Oppressive personalities who refuse to face their need for recovery. Oppressive personalities, huh? Both were assassinated after very big reigns. Shallum had been an assassin himself, so he died the same way he had risen to power. Pekahiah was killed by someone very close to him. If we tend to be oppressive in our relationships, we need to be careful. These people may tire of our abuse and either destroy us or abandon us to our misery. The reign of King Jotham of Judah, first as governor under his father Uzziah, and then in his own right, was a mixed bag. He exemplified faith and commitment to God up to a point, and had his predecessors. He gave attention to God's temple, but did not destroy the pagan shrines and false worship in Judah. So God turned up the heat, allowed Aram, and Israel to attack. In order to shatter Jotham's denial, God sometimes brings trials into our life to alert us of our denial. Profile: Hezekiah. Okay. Hezekiah inherited a kingdom that his father had led into social, economic, and spiritual decline. Upon his accession to the throne, Hezekiah courageously implemented sweeping reforms. He reopened the temple, which his father had nailed shut, and he abolished idolatry throughout the land. He followed God's instructions to the letter with 2 expectations. First, Hezekiah took credit for the blessings that God had given to him and to the nation of Israel. Hezekiah proudly displayed the wealth of his kingdom to the Babylonians, who would eventually conquer the kingdom of Judah. It was not really Hezekiah's wealth, it belonged to God. Second, he failed in his task as a father. He spent little time teaching Manasseh his son, and Ire, godly ways. When Manasseh became king, he reversed all his father's righteous reforms. The idol worship instituted during Manasseh's reign initiated one of the great spiritual declines in Israel's history. The prophet Jeremiah pinned Judah's ultimate demise on Manasseh, giving him the population as the most evil of all Judah's kings. Hezekiah's failures are easy to repeat. We can look at our possession, status, and progress in recovery and think we have achieved it all, forgetting that God was the one who gave them to us. We can get caught up in work activities, even the things we do for God, and forget that our primary task is to prepare the next generation to follow in the path of righteousness. What we have learned from the past and are learning in the present must be communicated to the leaders of the future. Jesus illustrated the importance of this by spending quality time with his disciple. His hope for the future. We need to follow Jesus' examples, not Hezekiah's. Strengths and accomplishments. Hezekiah instituted sweeping spiritual and political reforms. He had a powerful prayer life. He maintained a consistent personal relationship with God. Weaknesses and mistakes. Hezekiah failed to train his son and protect the reforms he had instituted. He showed Judah's wealth to Babylonian messengers and took credit for it. We must lessons from his life. We must teach our families what we learn in recovery. If we want to protect them from our past failures, when we turn our lives over to God, amazing results will occur. Key verses. And Hezekiah prayed this prayer before the Lord. He said, "True Lord, that the king of Assyria have thrown the gods of these nations into the fire and burned them. They were not all gods. It is true, Lord, that the kings of Assyria have thrown the gods of these nations into the fire and burned them. They were not gods at all, only idols of wood and stone shaped by human hands. Now, O Lord our God, rescue us. Then all the kingdoms of the earth will know that you alone, O Lord our God." Hezekiah's story is told in 2 Kings, Chronicles, Isaiah. He's mentioned in Chronicles, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Proverbs, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Micah, Zephaniah, Matthew. All right, I am leaving it at that for now. Whew, that was a long round, and that's okay. Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you like the fire. I like the fire. All right. See you later. Have a good day.